welcome to the very first episode of Impatient Histories. I'm the Impatient Historian. And since saving time is obviously important to me, what better way to kick off this show than with a series on the history of telling time?
The passage of time is an inescapable aspect of life on Earth. But what exactly is time? How have different societies throughout history understood and measured time? What were the discoveries, necessities, and inventions that drove the development of timekeeping devices? And finally, how did we end up living in such a strictly time-regimented society?
These are some of the concepts we'll explore in this series of Impatient Histories, the history of telling time.
Humans have always lived their lives in recognizable patterns, the most obvious being our tendency to be active during the day and to sleep at night. We see similar patterns in nature. Many flowers open to the sun's light during the day and close at night in its absence. Animals tend to be most active during the daylight hours or at night.
What we have in common is the fact that we respond to the regular movements of heavenly bodies.
Mankind's interest in the movement of sun, moon, and stars across the sky goes back millennia. Archaeologists believe that the first calendars were inscribed on cave walls and bones perhaps as far back as 30,000 years ago. Bones found in Europe and Africa, dating back at least 10,000 years, contain marks that could correspond to the phases of the moon, and some ancient cave paintings might have served a similar purpose. Fast forward a few millennia BC and consider Stonehenge, one of over 1,000 stone circles on the British Isles. The construction of Stonehenge dates back at least 5,000 years, and what makes it particularly interesting, aside from the fact that people moved 25-ton rocks without modern machinery, is the alignment of certain stones with the summer and winter solstices.
We'll talk more about solstices in another episode. But for now, notice that Stonehenge functions as a record and predictor of astronomical events. While we're not entirely sure why the builders designed Stonehenge in this way, they clearly intended the stones to line up with respect to the sun's position at repeating intervals of time. So what? Well, before I tell you why you should care about Stonehenge or solstices, let's get fundamental and answer one essential question. What is time? Our English word time is Anglo-Saxon and dates back at least to the 10th century. There are dozens of meanings for the word time, but we'll focus on one. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the most essential meaning of time is a finite extent or stretch of continued existence, as the interval separating two successive events or actions, or the period during which an action, condition, or state continues. So that's what time is, but that's so abstract. We're interested in a more concrete concept, how human beings have measured time throughout history. Look again at the definition of time. It is finite, it has a beginning and an end, and it involves the observation of events or actions. Aristotle described time as measure of motion and of being moved, and said that every change and everything that moves is in time. Anthropologist and astronomer Anthony Aveni wrote, "All living organisms sense time by responding to phenomena that change." So, we measure time by observing actions or events in our environment, and we keep time by recognizing patterns in those events. Back to stones and bones.
Over the course of time, ancient peoples living on the British Isles watched the sun's movements, recognized a pattern, and permanently arranged 25-ton stones to align with those astronomical events at future points in time. And if the carvings in those ancient bones are a record of the phases of the moon, their carvers might have used them as a calendar for planning or communication.
So what? Well, these days, we don't think much about the science of telling time. The work's been done for us, so all we have to do is look at our mobile phone. Ancient people didn't have mobile phones or clocks or watches. Stone circles, carved bones, and cave paintings were created thousands of years before our modern methods of telling time, and they point out two important developments in human history. One, mankind's discovery of patterns in the movement of celestial bodies, and two, efforts to mark the passage of time and predict future events based on observation of these patterns. And while humans have developed increasingly precise methods of measuring time, we still live out our lives according to the patterns set by celestial bodies. So, how did we get from stones and bones to digital watches? Find out in the next 14 episodes of Impatient Histories as we explore the history of telling time.